Alright, this is lesson 2 in the surface area unit. We're looking at the surface area of rectangular and triangular prisms today. Okay, so we're going to see two different shapes today, and we need to know how to calculate their area. So this should be a review for you. A rectangle, when I want to find the area, I'm finding the amount of space that this rectangle takes up, what I'm coloring in yellow here. And there's a formula we use for that. It's length times width. And a triangle is essentially half the size of a rectangle. So for that reason, for a triangle, and for some reason we typically use different words to describe the length and the width. We use base and height, but it's the same idea, length times width. So it's base times height, but divided by 2, because triangles are half the size of rectangles. In order to visualize that, I could draw this here, and you can see that if this was a rectangle, the yellow part that I shaded in is half its size. Okay, so that's why we divide by 2. Okay, let's start with rectangular prisms. So what I want to do first is just remind you what rectangular prisms look like when we unfold them. So when I unfold a rectangular prism, we see we have 6 sides to it. A front, back, 2 sides, a top, and a bottom. So when I do my calculations, what I'm doing is finding the area of all the surfaces. So all 6 sides, the front, the back, the top, the bottom, and then the left and the right side. So what I want to do is make my equation, set up my equation or calculations in that order. So first let's do the front and the back. I can't see the back, but I know it's the same as the front. And it looks, I'm shading it in here in pink. So the front and the back, they both have a length and a width of 11 yards and 7 yards. So the area would be 11 times 7, and since there's 2 of those, I'm going to multiply this by 2. So that would give me the area of the front and the back. So 7 times 11 times 2 happens to be 154. And when we find area, because we've multiplied 2 lengths of yards together, we end up with yards squared for our area. Okay, top and bottom. Let's do that in blue. So top and bottom, I'll keep this consistent here, yeah. So we have top and bottom is 2 by 11. So 2 yards times 11 yards, and since there's a top and a bottom, 2 of those, I'm going to multiply it by 2, and that gives me 44 yards squared. Again, yards squared. And then my last one is the sides. So the sides here, if we look at the length and the width, this length is going to be 2. It's the same as this. And this height is going to be 7. So it's going to be 2 yards times 7 yards. And there's 2 sides. There's a left and a right side, so times 2. So altogether, I've added 6 rectangles together. Front and back, top and bottom, and sides. So for sides, I get 14 times 2, which is 28 yards squared. So this is the area of all the rectangles. And for the total, we're just going to add them all together. And when you add up all of those numbers together, you get a total of 226 yards squared. I'm going to box that in. So it's nice to set up your equations in this way, where you label them. And then that way, if you do happen to make a mistake, or you're handing this in as part of an assignment or a test, your teacher can easily find your mistake and see what you did right. Okay, let's do this one. You could pause the video here if you want and try on your own, or you could do it with me. We have a front and a back. We have a top and a bottom. I'm going to use the same colors. And then we have a left and a right side that we'll do. Okay, so this is a rectangular prism, so there's 6 sides all together that we need to add the areas up. Okay, so let's do front and back. The front and back are going to be 3 inches times 4 inches, length times width, and then there's 2 of them. So we'll multiply it by 2 to get 24 inches squared. Let's do the top and bottom. I'll just do top and bottom for short. The top and bottom are 4 inches by 8 inches. And there's 2 of them, so that gives us 64. And then the sides are 8 inches by 3 inches. And there's 2, a left and a right. and that's going to give us 48. If I add all those together, total is going to be 136 inches squared. Okay, actually I'll box it in so I'm consistent with the other one. So that's a rectangular prism. Next we're going to look at triangular prisms. So they look a little bit different. This time, instead of only dealing with rectangles, I'm going to have triangles as well. And let's just look at the net again to remind ourselves what this looks like when we unfold it. So when we unfold a triangular prism, we see we have 2 triangles and 3 rectangles to work with. So all of our calculations will involve the area of adding the area of 2 triangles and 3 rectangles together. So let's go ahead and do that. So usually I like to split up my calculations into the rectangles and the triangles separately. So let's do the triangles first. So the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. The base and the height have to be perpendicular to each other. So for this triangle, the base and the height are 10 and 12. So we're going to go 10 inches times 12 inches divided by 2. That's one triangle, and then there's another triangle on the back, so we're going to multiply by 2 as well. And so this is 120 inches squared. Okay, so that's both triangles. So again, I multiplied by 2 because there are 2 triangles. Okay, I'm going to erase a little bit of that just so it's not so cluttered here. Let's go ahead and do the rectangles. So there are 3 rectangles, and just think to yourself for a second, are all of those rectangles the same, or are some of them the same? Are they all different? How am I going to do the rectangles? So the only one that I see completely here is this one on the side, and it is going to be the same as this other one that's on the side. Both of these are going to be 13 by 16. So let's do those ones first. I'll call them the sides. 13 inches by 16 inches, and there's 2 of those. And so 13 times 16 times 2 is 416. And then there's one on the bottom that I can't see. The one on the bottom is going to be 10 by 16. And that's 160 inches squared. I add all those numbers together. The 160, the 416 for the 2 rectangles, and then the 2 triangles is 120. I add all of those together and I get my total surface area, which is 696 inches squared. What I like to do at the very end is just make sure I've added enough areas together, because there are a lot of steps here. It's easy to miss one. So I've done 2 triangles, and then 3 rectangles, 2 here and 1 here. So that's 5 sides altogether. Yes, a triangular prism has 5 sides, 2 triangles and 3 rectangles. Okay, let's try another one. Maybe you could pause the video and try this on your own, or maybe you want to do it with me. But I'm going to start with the triangles. So for the triangles, the base would be 3 and the height would be 4. You always want to pick the 2 numbers that are perpendicular to each other. And there's 2 of them, one in the front, one that we can't see in the back, but if I draw this little dotted line here, we can see it back there, right? So it's going to be 3 inches times 4 inches divided by 2, because for areas of triangles we need to divide by 2, and since there are 2 triangles, we multiply by 2. So it gives us 12 inches squared. Now for the rectangles, there are 3. They all have a length of 7, but they have different widths. One has a width of 5, one has a width of 4, and one has a width, the one on the bottom has a width of 3. So it's going to be 7 inches times 5 inches, 7 inches times 4 inches, and 7 inches times 3 inches. They're all different sides or lengths, because every side length of this rectangle or triangle is different. So if I were to highlight the only one of those rectangles you can actually see in the picture, it's this one, the 7 by 5 one, but then there's one on the side here, and then there's one on the bottom as well. So we have 35 inches squared, 28 inches squared, and 21 inches squared. Let's just make sure I've added everything I need to. I've got 2 triangles and 3 rectangles. Yes, I'm good to go. So we have our total now. Add all those numbers together and you would get 96 inches squared. Always good to box in your final answer at the end. And there you go. That's the end of the lesson.